hope you're enjoying your summer. Is there anything better than summertime food? The watermelon, the barbecue, whatever that is. I mean, the summertime food is just amazing, but is there anything better than good old homemade ice cream? You ever make homemade ice cream? I mean, it's take no disrespect to Breyers and Dryers and Sunny Select and even Haagen-Dazs and Ben and Jerry's. There's just something amazing about homemade ice cream when it's done right and when it's prepared well and when you take the time to let it do its thing and work its way out. It is perfection in its best. When I was a boy, my grandfather had one of those, an old hand crank ice cream maker. I mean, I see some of you younger people even shaking your head. I think maybe they have them in retro, you can buy one or see one. But you put all the ingredients together and you chill it and you bake it or cook it or whatever it is and you pour it. You can tell I never had any part in that part of it. But you pour it in the bucket and you put it in the ice maker, put the ice around it, and we begin to crank. And of course, being little, me and my sisters and my brother, we just thought it was the greatest thing ever that we got to crank this ice cream maker. And my grandfather was adamant, whatever you do, don't open it until it's done. I'll tell you when it's done because it has to go through the process and it has to be done right and it has to take its time and it will be done when it's done. And so me, in my brilliance of, whatever age I was, turning that crank, I just could not resist opening it up and seeing what was going on inside. Is it done yet? And so there was a moment where, and I remember it clearly, where I was out there by myself turning the crank, and I was like, this is my chance. And I opened it up, and when I opened it up, a bunch of ice and rock salt fell in, And so I was like, uh-oh. And so I put the lid back on and just like nothing ever happened. And so then it got done and we all took it. My grandfather took it in and we put it in bowls. And the first thing he did when he took the top off, he said, who looked? Who let the rock salt in the ice cream? It was obvious. I don't remember if I admitted it or not. I probably didn't, knowing my past. But what happens when you take things into your own hands and you don't let it take its time and do what it's supposed to do and do what's right? And when we're thinking, you're this morning, I'm sure you're sitting here wondering, what in the world does it have to do with David? Well, consider this. At a young age, as a boy, David is anointed king. We know this from our study, right? Samuel came and anointed him as a little shepherd boy. A few years later, he goes and he kills Goliath. We know that story, right? We saw that. Teenager, maybe 15 years old, thereabouts, he kills Goliath, thrust into the era of his popularity with all the people of Israel. And then because of Saul's jealousy, he's caused to have to go on the run in hiding. And for 10 years, David is running and hiding in the wilderness, all the while knowing that he's been anointed as the future king of Israel. And do we ever hear David complaining? Oh, David's done some kind of dumb things in his tenure as prospective king, but we've never heard him complain and say, oh my gosh, why is all this happening to me? And if you go back and you read the Psalms, some of the Psalms that David wrote during this time when he's in the wilderness and when he's running, you can hear his heart. He's pouring his heart out to God, but never once does he complain. He pours his heart out in anguish and in fear, and yet at the same time glorifying God and recognizing him, who he is in his life. And we've seen David with the opportunity to take things into his own hand and the opportunity to kill Saul. When Saul went into the cave in Adullam and he and his men are back there, they had the opportunity to kill Saul. And David says, no, we're not going to play the role of God here. That's God's job. It's his timing. It's his will. We're not going to go there. And so he continues to run and he continues to hide. And there are times when Saul's after him, and there's times when Saul repents and says, I'm not after him. But David never knows what he's going to do and where he's going to be. And there's another instance where David has the opportunity to take things into his own hands, end Saul's reign once and for all, and be able to take over the throne that God promised him and God anointed him to do. And so in this particular time, Saul, with 3,000 hand-picked men, has gone out, and they're searching for David. They're searching the wilderness, and they've gotten an inside tip that they know where David is. And sure enough, they come and they're very close to David's location, and they set up their camp. And the way they would have done it, their 3,000 troops, the king would have been in the center. He would have been protected by his 3,000 troops all around him. Impossible to get to the king, impossible to do him damage. And all through this, David is recognizing that God's plan, not his plan, was what really mattered. And so this morning, as we go into the message that God has for us, I want to ask us that same question. Is that what really matters to us? Is it God's plan for our lives? The fact that he created you beautiful and perfect in his sight, the fact that he created you to accomplish something for him, something that really matters, and is that what really matters to us is what matters to God? And so, as I mentioned, 10 years that David's been doing through this, he has the opportunity to end this once and for all. And so he gets a couple of his closest buddies, and they've seen where Saul is camped with his 3,000 crack troops, and he gets a couple of his closest buddies, and he says, hey, Abiathar, Ahimelech, let's go down, let's sneak into the camp and see what we can see. And so Abishai says, okay, let's go. Closest buddy, right? You always got your friends back. You always got your buddies back. Ahimelech, maybe he doesn't tell us what his response is, but maybe at the time he says, not so fast. I don't think I'll go down there and do that. So David and Abishai, they go down into the camp and they sneak in to the camp. And we begin the story in 1 Samuel 26, verses 7 and 8. And it says, David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying on the ground, asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner, who was his closest general, the one who was supposed to be protecting the king, Abner is there, and the soldiers were lying around him. And Abishai says to David, they sneak into camp, they're standing in the middle of the camp, all the troops are asleep, go figure. And Abishai says to David, today, God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now, let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice. Once is going to be good enough. I'll kill him, I'll pin him to the ground, and we can get on with this whole thing of you becoming king. The prior time when they were in the cave and his men tried to talk David into doing this, David said no. He talked him off the ledge. We're not going to do this. We're not going to take God's plan and make it our plan. We're not going to take our plan and make it God's plan. We're going to wait for God's timing. But now, Abishai is saying, if you won't do it, I'll do it. I'll take this matter into my hands and I'll kill him even if you don't want to. And once again, David says, hold on. Let's just take a step back and let's let God do what his will is. And in verses 9 through 10, we see David's response to Abishai. He says, but David said to Abishai, don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, he said, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and the water jug that are near his head, and let's go. So David took the spear and the water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew anything about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. You see, this is all part of God's master plan. He's orchestrating this. And maybe we don't see the specific reason why God is orchestrating this at the moment, but it will become apparent as we go forward. And so David and Abishai, they take the sword and the jug and they leave camp and they walk out, and David goes up on a hill not too far away, and when he gets over there, he calls out and he says, hey, Abner, what are you doing? Aren't you supposed to be guarding the king? And he begins to taunt Abner a little bit as the king's guard. And in verses 15 to 25, it says, David said, you're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? He's addressing Abner. Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where's the king's spear and the water jug that were near his head?" So David's sticking the sword in a little bit verbally on his own, kind of the proverbial needle prodding him a little bit. And while he's having this conversation, Saul wakes up and he recognizes David's voice. And it says, Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" David replied, "Yes, it is, my lord the king." And he added, "Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of?" Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong." "Here is the king's spear," David answered. "Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble." Then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." There's a little line in there that we oftentimes skip over, and it says this: "The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness." And the last time I checked, everyone included us, does it not? The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and their faithfulness. See, righteousness, what that means is it's right living. It's living the way God created us to live. It's pursuing God. It's pursuing His plan. It's running after Him, and we sing about that, running after God. And faithfulness comes from probably the most difficult thing we'll ever be asked to do, and that's waiting on God. Anybody here good at waiting? Patience? I am not. I am probably the worst patient, least patient, worst at waiting on anything. And that's the way our culture is, isn't it? We want it, and we want it now. And we've made it so easy in our world to go out and just buy something. I mean, you order something from Amazon and it shows up the same day. I mean, go figure. You know, you go through Burger King and you can have it your way. But real faithfulness, the kind of faithfulness that God demands from us, comes from waiting on Him, waiting on His plan. You see, it's His plan, it's His will, it's His way, it's His time, every time, that's perfect. His will, His way, His time, every time, even when we go through things and we question and we say, "Why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me?" And I don't think God minds that we question sometimes. "God, what do you have for me in this? What are you doing?" But see, the thing is you're pursuing God through it all. Even if this happens to me, I am still going to wait on God. I am still going to pursue Him. His righteousness and faithfulness in Him, trusting Him no matter what. His will, His way, His time, every time is always perfect, because God is perfect and He created you to be in His will, His way, and His time. So we come at this moment, and you know, I'm going through a lot of this. There's a lot here that's going unsaid, because in the interest of time, we could probably take a year to study David's life. I encourage you, go back and read 1 Samuel, read 2 Samuel. It reads like a novel. It's incredible, and it's kind of gory, and it's kind of bloody, and there's some bad stuff in there. But that's the reality that David lived in his time. Kind of like the reality that we live in, isn't it not? But at this moment, this is really the last time in 1 and 2 Samuel when we see any more contact between David and Saul. The end of 1 Samuel comes to the end of an era. 1 Samuel comes to a close. Saul's sons, so they go in battle. There's this huge battle now, not David, but the Israelites and Saul and his army. They're in a huge battle with the Philistines, and David's sons are killed. Not all of them, but his oldest, Jonathan included, who remember was David's best friend, are killed in this battle. And when Saul hears about this, he hears the news that his sons have been killed, and he just can't live with that anymore. And he demands his armor bearer, says, kill me, take my life, because it's not worth living anymore, because my sons have been killed. And his armor bearer says, I can't do that. It says he was taken with fear and was afraid to kill the king. Well, yeah, I would be too, probably. And so Saul falls on his sword and kills himself. The end of an era. Again, as David said already, waiting for God in his timing, in his plan, that Saul is basically killed in battle, and the end of that era. So now David is free to take the throne, right? Well, maybe not so fast. David should be rejoicing, right? He should be throwing a party. It's over. Saul will not be chasing us down anymore. We don't have to worry about it anymore. I'm free to take over as king of Israel. Well, there's a guy, an Amalekite, who was part of this whole battle that was going on, and he comes to David with the news that Saul is dead and that Saul's sons are dead. And so even though David has the opportunity and he has the motive, and maybe even from our perspective, he has the right to rejoice, listen to David's response when this Amalekite brings the news that Saul is dead. This guy comes from the battlefield and he tells the story. He tells David the story of Saul's death and his sons. And he actually brings Saul's crown that he was wearing in battle and the king armband that Saul had on as proof that he was there and that Saul was dead. And then he also claimed to have killed Saul in a mercy killing. He was wounded. He was mortally wounded. And so I took his life so he wouldn't suffer anymore. Well, listen to David's response in 2 Samuel 1, 11 through 15. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord, and for the nations of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, "Where are you from?" "I am the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite," he answered. David asked him, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of his men and said, "Go, strike him down." So he struck him down and he died. For David had said to him, "Your blood be on your own head, your own mouth testified against you when you said, 'I have killed the Lord's anointed.'" You see, David couldn't tolerate himself killing the king, nor would he ever tolerate anyone else doing it as well, taking God's plan, taking the purpose of God into their own hands and doing their own thing. And isn't it true that when we do that, isn't it true that when we kind of take things into our own hands, oftentimes there are consequences for that, right? Sometimes God allows us to go our own way. Okay, you want to go there, but don't say I didn't warn you. Now, I don't mean to put words in the mouth of God, but I'm sure there's many times when he said to me, "Don't say I never warned you," and I go my own way anyway. And there are consequences when that happened. And so finally, David becomes a king. He becomes a king, but not the king. It's not what we think. See, David asked the Lord for direction. When all this dust is settled, Saul is dead, his sons, most of his sons are dead. And David inquires of the Lord, "What is it that you want me to do?" All these years that David has waited. I don't know what he expected God to say. I'm thinking he was probably expecting, "It's time for you to take the kingship." But the Lord told David, "Go to Hebron," which is in Judah, which is kind of the southern part of Israel, "and wait there and see what happens." And we pick up that story in 2 Samuel 5, 1 through 5. And it says, "All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, 'We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel in their military campaigns, and the Lord said to you, "You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, The king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. See, David didn't right away become the king of Israel. He goes to Hebron, which I think I put a map up there, didn't I, Kelly? And it kind of gives you an idea. So Israel, which is King Saul's reign, is that all part in the upper part, the northern part of Israel. And then Judah, David was of the house of Judah. And so we see a kingdom split because David goes to Hebron, which is the lower circle. And the men of Hebron come to him and say, you're going to be our king. And so David becomes the king of Judah. But in the land of Israel, now one of King Saul's sons, Ishbosheth, becomes king. So now we have a house divided. We have a land divided. We have David, the king of one tribe, Judah, and we have Ishbosheth, the king of all Israel, all the other tribes, and there is civil war in the land of Israel. Again, God's timing. It wasn't the time yet for David to become the king over all of Israel. But it happens, and in that passage of scripture that I just read, see, there was a fierce and bloody civil war between the two. And finally, Ishbosheth is killed in his bed by his own men. And there's all this intrigue going on. And all this time, God is orchestrating. All this time, God is molding David to become king. And then, as we just read, finally, at the age of 30, it's like 15 years after David killed Goliath, he becomes the king that God promised him that he would be. 15 years from the time of his popularity in Jerusalem, 10 years hiding in the wilderness. And all that time that he's in the wilderness, never do we hear of David lamenting the fact that he should be king. I should be king. How come this is taking so long? Come on, God, let's get with the program here. You promised me to be king. Let's get it on. Let's get going with it. And isn't that kind of the attitude that we take? And we don't maybe verbally or even think that in our own minds. But when we don't wait on God, when we don't listen to his plan, when we don't pursue him, when we don't seek him for his plan for our life, we miss out on the blessing. At best, we miss out on the blessing that God wants to give us. And at worst, we suffer the consequences for taking our future, our lives, and everything we do into our own hands. Never do we hear of David lamenting that he should be king. Never do we hear him say, it was his right. It's my right. It's my right. This was given to me. This was the right that I was anointed for. This is the right that I take. And how often do we assert our rights when people invade our space, when people do things to us and take those rights away from us, what we think are our rights? Never do we see David take matters into his own hands to help God with his plans. And don't we do that as well? God, I can help you with this. I'm going to go, this is my plan. I'm going to do it. So let's get with the program. Never do we hear David say he was entitled to the throne. And we live in a day and age of entitlement, do we not? We live in a day and age that we think we are entitled to our space. We're entitled to our voice. We're entitled to do whatever we want to do, whatever that looks like, because it's my right as a human being. That's what the humanistic viewpoint of the world we live in today is like, that, isn't it? But God said, no, my plan for you is completely opposite. You are not entitled to anything other than what I have provided for you, other than that what I have created you to be, because his plan is perfect. His will, his way, his time, every time, even when, even if. And if we could just learn that, if we could just get that through our minds, to wait on God, to pursue him, to seek him out, even for the little things that we do, even through the little things that we go through, good or bad. God cares. He knows your hairs are numbered, right? Some of us, that's a pretty easy job. Others, it may take a while longer. But God knows How many hairs are on your head? He knows your name. He created you intimately in his image to be like him. And when we recognize that and when we pursue him, and when we live in his righteousness, and when we live in faithfulness, then we begin to see the blessing in our lives of how God created us and what he created us for. I love Jeremiah 29:11 and 29:11 through 13. I love that portion of scripture. It's one of my favorite passages in all the Bible. And Jeremiah, who was one of the great prophets, said this, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans for hope and a future." And see, sometimes we stop right there. Sometimes we just, oh, that's awesome. I love to hear that. God has a plan for me. He has a plan to give me hope and a future. And he does that. He has a plan for a hope and a future for every one of us. Plans to prosper us and not to harm us, and not prosper us from a humanistic, worldly standpoint, but prosper us from a God's point of view and his standpoint, his plan. But it goes on from there. And it says, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." See, it takes effort on our part. It takes something on our part to see that plan that God has created for us. He doesn't just hit us over the head with it. Oh, I guess he could, and sometimes maybe he does. But mostly it's a journey. Mostly it's a process of seeking God. It rarely goes the way we think it should or expect it. And as we have the band come on forward, they're going to close with a song this morning, but it rarely goes the way we think it should or expect it, and it rarely goes the way we want it to, and it rarely goes the way we plan it. But when we seek him, trust him, and wait for him, it changes everything. It changes our attitudes. It changes our fears. It changes our outlook in life in general. It changes everything. And so the challenge for us this morning is wait on God. Whatever that looks like for us. And we say, I have mouths to feed. I have a spouse to please. I have a boss to appease. I have deadlines and goals to achieve. I have pain to relieve. I have chores and hobbies to retrieve. Who has time to wait on God? And isn't that the way we live our lives? God says, no. Be still and know that I am God. Pursue me. Seek me first and my righteousness, and everything else will be added unto you. And let me close with this. David wrote a couple Psalms where he addressed this very issue of waiting on God. In Psalm 37:7, he says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." And in Psalm 41-3, he says, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God." That's what we have when we focus on God and put our trust in him. Guys, let's finish up with that last song.